Clearwater started as a small farming community in 1900 with a population of 343 citizens. In 1911, as Clearwater began to boom and residents began to invest time and effort in becoming more than a tourist mecca and agricultural centre, the Clearwater Library Association opened a subscription library on the second floor of People's Bank. Once the Mayor and Town Council approved the name Clearwater Public Library, they accepted the Carnegie money and appointed architect F.J. Kennard of Tampa to design the building and create a construction contract.
During the early years of the Clearwater Library, it was really what was known as a subscription library. And this was a concept that had been brought over by the Europeans based on the values and systems of the educated elite. In order to be a member of the library, you had to apply for membership and be approved. You couldn't just easily walk into the library and get a card and check out books.
In September of 1916, the Women's Club arranged a reception along with the library board in celebration of Clearwater's first public library. The first librarian appointed was Miss Margaret Duncan, who was given a salary of $50 per month. The Clearwater Public Library was on its way to being a popular hub to its community, having circulated 2,792 books by 1,277 visitors within its first year.
With the endowment by Andrew Carnegie for public libraries, the Clearwater Library truly became a public library. If you were a resident or an approved tourist, you could get a library card, and you were allowed to check out 2 books, only one of which could be fiction. And part of the reason for this was that the collection was very small. We had very few books, and we also had only a few newspapers and magazine subscriptions. But it did begin the process of making this library truly a public library.
As the years pushed on, the collection increased to over 18,000 books and had topped 100,000 circs by 1935.
Florida experienced a land boom in the 1920s, especially during the early 1920s, but it went bust before the global economic crisis in 1927. So we had a peculiar experience with the Great Depression. Nevertheless, we benefited from federal programs, including the WPA, which provided workers in the library who did all sorts of tasks. So despite the fact that we had a Great Depression, the library system thrived.
As early as 1917, library board minutes had noted a discussion for a coloured library proposition, but the main branch had been the focus of all efforts, until black citizens brought the real need for a branch library to the head librarian's, Sarah Byers' attention.
From the beginning of the establishment of the library, the African American community lobbied for access to library services. But it wasn't until after World War II that city leaders responded to African American leaders and established the first Negro library, as they referred to it, in Greenwood neighborhood. And this at first was just a storefront on Pennsylvania Avenue, but after 1950, efforts were made to create a real library, to build a new library, which was finally created in 1962.
After a bit of time, newly hired librarian Christine Morris opened the doors to the North Greenwood Library, which was originally located at Pennsylvania and Cedar Street on March the 15th, 1950.
Christine Morris was the head of the North Greenwood Library from 1950 to 1983, and she was very well respected and admired, not only for her work in the community, but also as a library associate for the state of Florida. She and her staff were very active in developing more collections for the North Greenwood Library section, and also for establishing programs that served the community.
The population of Clearwater increased to over 15,000 by 1954, and City Manager Middleton recommended the library's long-term plans to include branch libraries in the northern and eastern sectors of the city. It won't be until the 1980s before this goal has been reached.
After World War II, through the 1960s and 70s, the state of Florida underwent huge expansion, which created demand for libraries around the area. And Clearwater also expanded north, east, south, and especially west to the beaches.
1961 was a productive year for the library system. The main library underwent a large renovation, while the new Beach Branch Library opened its doors on July the 21st under the roof of the Memorial Civic Centre. The Beach Library was eventually moved to Pelican Walk Shopping Centre in July 1999. Almost a decade later, in July 2008, the beach location was moved once again to its current location, joining forces with the Clearwater Beach Recreation Complex.
In February of 1960, the Friends of the Library was formed thanks to the effort of the Women's Club and other organizations. That organization has helped provide not just new volunteers, but new ideas about fundraising for the library.
The Friends of the Library reorganised in 1971 and grew in the next 10 years to well over 500 members, who through book sales and other fundraising projects supported the library in many ways.
One of the things that the Friends have always done is been supportive of the system. We believe definitely that the library is a community center that is not just books. It is a place for gathering and for accomplishing everything. And of course, today's world, with the need for computers, a lot of people can't afford a computer, but in order to get a job, they have to go online. In order to get welfare benefits, you have to go online. So definitely the library has expanded from a book community center to definitely a community center.
As population continued to rise, the need for a branch within the Eastern District became apparent. However, money at the time was not readily available, so they created a temporary Twig location, which opened in 1978 in the training room of Fire Station No. 5 by the Clearwater Mall. Elliot Hardaway became the director in 1971. Coming from the University of South Florida with extensive experience in libraries and management, Hardaway's arrival heralded new development in the life of the library.
After Elliot Hardaway retired from the University of South Florida and became the director of the Clearwater Public Library, he also contributed to expansion of programs at Clearwater, as he had at USF. He hired new professional librarians and expanded programs like the children's program.
It was clear that the citizens were, in large part, behind the construction of community libraries. While supporting the concept of a county-wide system, as it had for years, Clearwater needed more library buildings. The City Commission approved a 0.25 millage increase for an East Library.
I got elected to the City Council, and I decided that if we're going to get a library, the City Council is going to have to do something about it. So in '82, I recommended that we raise the millage rate 0.25 mil, dedicate it to building 2 libraries, and dedicate for library use only. And when the libraries were built, then it could go away. The City Commission could take a decision at that time to either continue it or to reduce it back to without the 0. And luckily enough, one of the city councilmen that was just elected to the council was from Countryside. So I knew I had at least 1 vote out of the 5. And thankfully, it was 5-0 to go ahead with a 2.25 mil to build Countryside at East Library. So in '85, we built, the East Library was finished. I think in '87, Countryside was finished. So it was because of that lucky being in the right spot at the right place that we were able to get our branch libraries.
The East Branch has taken a particular role in serving the Hispanic community of our area and has provided language programs and other kinds of cultural and ethnic programs that help the community celebrate its roots as well as assimilate into the larger community.
That same year, the Greater Clearwater Public Library Foundation was organised. The foundation formulated 2 major objectives: to provide library enhancements beyond the traditional tax-funded services, and to provide library access to the underserved. At the turn of the century, the world saw a boom in technological advances. Libraries were beginning to morph into their new role as collaborative learning spaces. Within the first decade of the new century, the Clearwater Public Library system had embraced many wonderful changes.
We've been able to move to having technology do some of the routine type of activities that computers can really do well, which then frees up our staff to do some of the things that computers can't do well, like really being there to help our patrons. So we have the self-check machines that are in the library, and we have sorting machines in our large libraries that allow the material to be checked out and checked in by the computers, and we don't have to have people doing all of those specific activities any longer. And now they can talk to people, and they can find out what they need, and they can really make service more specific to the individual person coming in the library.
Voters authorised the city to issue bonds in order to build the new main library, and was designed by world-renowned architect Robert A.M. Stern, Dean of the Yale University School of Architecture. It was built to serve as a cultural attraction and as a northern anchor of the downtown area.
Libraries really have youth and teen services as a cornerstone of what we do. We have always been involved in trying to get kids reading at the youngest age. So having kids read for pleasure and having them exposed to reading and the words and the vocabulary and the experience of being in library programs when they're preschool prepares them for school. And then again, continuing to have them exposed to reading during the summer. It takes them through the summer without the summer lag that happens if they're not really keeping up with any of their school type activities during that time. Kids who read for pleasure succeed in school better than anybody else. And kids who come to school exposed to reading and exposed to just having the kinds of conversations around books and activities are the kids who are best likely to succeed. So we think of ourselves as part of the educational institution, and a valuable part of that gets kids ready and keeps them ready as they move through their school years.
And I would encourage our young people especially that by reading and staying on top of things, it expands your mind. It helps you understand other people. And that's the greatest thing about a library. It brings people together. It brings you to a place where you can learn, you can experience, and the resources that our libraries have today. You know, we used to have the old card catalog systems, and if you were lucky, you would find the right number, you know, and be able to find what you're looking for. Now, with the expertise our library staff has, with all the computers that, again, years ago were just a dream.
In October 2015, the Countryside branch moved into its new location on Sable Springs Drive. With the introduction of the Maker movement, the Clearwater library system has begun the process of building special areas dedicated to collaborative learning in hopes of instilling creativity and innovation amongst all generations within the community. The library now offers basic classes in 3D printing, sewing, robotics, and will continue to develop partnerships in order to create a more active and engaging environment.
When Andrew Carnegie decided to endow public libraries, he did it because he believed in the free diffusion of knowledge for all. So the public library has played a very important part in everyone's informal education. As a professor, researcher, and writer, I've been part of the formal education system. But the informal education system that libraries provide has been very important to me as well. I remember reading in a little nook in one of the Pinellas County public libraries and feeling the freedom of reading what I wanted to and following ideas and creativity in ways that the formal education system didn't provide. So I see the public library as dynamic, innovative, and responsive institution that's one of the most important ones in any city.
The people in Clearwater love their libraries. They support their libraries. They want their libraries to be there, giving them what they need, and that makes coming to work every single day a real pleasure for me. So Clearwater is a special city. The Clearwater library system, I believe, is a special library system, and it's really been a pleasure to be a part of it.
I especially appreciate, though, that our libraries reach out into the community and have different programs for the community, whether as a whole or depending on what part of town the library is located and how it addresses the needs of that particular neighborhood area or section of the community.
The 100th anniversary of the Clearwater Public Library System has been a memorable milestone for the city of Clearwater. This year has been full of rediscovering old traditions and looking back at how much the system has grown since its first 1,277 patrons. Though many changes have occurred throughout the century, one thing that will always remain is that the Clearwater Public Library System will always be a valued part of the Clearwater community.